Okay, so I'm back, and here I am showing you again the ATP structure. And down here is a nice diagram. It's not as nice and beautiful as what I just showed you, but it's still good. Here was my simpleton diagram, but here's pretty much the same thing. Okay, we have ATP plus the water. There's the hydrolysis happening. See, it says hydrolysis. It yields that ADP plus phosphate. Okay, energy for cellular work is going to go endergonic out, but remember, this still is releasing energy out to become endergonic for cell processes. Here's the process of phosphorylation down here, where that phosphate molecule attaches to another molecule, rams into it and it attaches, and that's a good thing. Okay. And then over here, the energy, the exergonic energy from respiration is going into, so this is endergonic, and ATP synthetase is helping along with this to synthesize the ATP again. Okay, so you can see when you look at these diagrams sometimes, you almost need to, that exergonic, endergonic thing, it gets confusing. Okay, so try to think always energy released, energy absorbed. And it happens like if energy is released someplace, it's got to be absorbed the next place, then released the next place, then absorbed. That's that energy transformation that we talked about in metabolic pathways. All right, so the final thing we have to talk about after structure and cycle is work. Work. Okay, so work. I won't sing anything right now. Okay, ATP work. So first we're going to start off with a few very important things to say here. Work, okay, and coupling. What is coupling? It's more like couples therapy instead of coupling. And I'll explain that in a moment, okay? That's like my little analogy. Okay, first off, ATP hydrolysis, that's when the phosphate breaks off, is how cells drive work. Okay, we know that. In other words, when ATP breaks off from hydrolysis, that phosphate goes ramming into something. It shoots off there, and that's going to drive some sort of work. And I've already mentioned the three types of work. It's going to be chemical, it's going to be transport, or it's going to be mechanical. Okay, and we're going to see how each of those three things actually do this, how the phosphate does this. Okay, now that is going to drive work. So that means it's an exergonic process. That's the exergonic process of the phosphate breaking off is going to drive endergonic processes. That's that thing about exergonic drives endergonic feeds into exergonic, and okay? That's what we call coupling. Okay, and ATP is graded it. Okay, and we say that this coupling is mediated by ATP. So in other words, exergonic process, and this is why I say it's more like a couples therapist. Okay, ATP is going to take all that energy that's being released from the exergonic process, and it's actually going to drive an endergonic process. It's going to put that energy into a better thing. Okay, instead of it all being released and going nowhere. ATP is going to use that. That's what coupling is. ATP is going to drive another endergonic process because it's going to become exergonic. So it's going to be the middleman between these two processes. That's what coupling is about. Okay, so you'll learn coupling if you decide to become an engineer of some sort. If you decide to talk about any form of energy, really, is always coupled. Tit for tat, okay? And it always goes together, like salt and pepper and up and down, okay? All right, so what's my next thing? What are the three types of work? Now, we know this. I already mentioned the three types. Here they are. Chemical, transport, and mechanical. We're actually going to work backwards. We're going to first talk about the mechanical work, okay? Mechanical work is when ATP releases that phosphate and it literally, that says rams, into a motor protein, knocking it to move, okay? If something rammed into you, would it push you a little bit? Well, yes, it would. If it's somebody shoved into you, it would bump you a little bit. Now, maybe not everybody. Some of you are pretty tough. But, it would knock most people over. This is what happens when the spindle fibers pull the chromosomes apart in metaphase of mitosis. And meiosis, right? Those spindle fibers, they literally have these little motor proteins, and you almost got to see the video of it. I'm going to have to include the video of it on here, that literally have to walk the line, I call them. These motor proteins get rammed into, and they keep getting pushed by all these little phosphate molecules. Boom, 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 phosphorylating, and it makes them walk the line. And the line that they're walking is actually a microtubule, and they're pulling the chromosomes apart with them. It's like these little guys that are walking on this tightrope, and somebody keeps bumping into them. They've got to be like, whoa, stay on the tightrope, stay on the tightrope. It's a fascinating thing. And this is how your muscles also like contract. When muscle fibers come together, like when they contract together, it's actually motor proteins that are pulling them all together. But where is that energy coming from to make them slide together like that? From ATP. Again, ATP is driving everything. It's driving it by releasing those phosphates. In this case, for mechanical work, releasing those phosphates and literally are bamming into the next molecule. Bam, 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 to make it move. Okay, and that's your mechanical work. Next thing, and it's funny they separate these two things, but I kind of think they're similar, and I'll tell you why. In transport, ATP is going to release that phosphate again. Yes, that's the same. That's going to phosphorylate, change the shape of a transport protein. Those are the proteins in like a membrane. When phosphorylation happens, when that phosphate rams into the molecule, it's literally going to take those protein molecules and maybe like tell them to like, whoa, open up. Okay, remember those protein molecules in the cell membrane. They need to be run into so that they'll open up. And that's how the sodium potassium pump works. Again, something that's used in your muscles as well as nerves. Okay, so here, both places, this is what I want to say or stress here. The phosphate is running into the next molecule and changing the shape in some sort of way. In the case of the motor proteins, it's changing it to like walk the line, walk the line, walk the line. But here, it's changing the shape to say open up. Open up, open up, okay? And when we get into cell communication, it also takes ATP to sometimes open up these receptors to recept a signal and send a message in, okay? So that's a sodium potassium pump and many other things too. And finally, we get to the most complicated thing. And you might look at this and be like, Horner, what are you doing here? All right, so we got to take it a little bit at a time. Okay, so we'll cover this up and we'll say, let's say that there's a general reaction out there where A plus B is going to make some sort of, maybe A is an element and B is an element. It's going to make some sort of compound, AB. Good old composition reaction there. Okay, now if you put A and B together and you have to push them together, right, it's going to take some energy. And you're like, energy that's going to go into the bond that holds these two together. So this process, okay, and look at what I say here. I put cost with a $sign. Why do I put cost with a $sign? That's a $sign if you can't see it. Because it's going to cost you 3.4, that's a point right there, 3.4 kilocalories per mole. This is endergonic because it's positive. Remember delta G, when it's positive, is endergonic. Okay, so that costs, endergonic things cost energy. And that's a lot of energy. Okay, you don't want to have to pay to do this, do you? No, nobody wants to have to pay. Nobody wants to give up their energy to do this. So along comes the little couples therapist, ATP. How does ATP drive this? And remember, coupling is where ATP is going to drive something. From its exergonic release of that phosphate, it's going to drive some endergonic process. And here's where we're going to see that in this chemical reaction here. This chemical reaction wants to be endergonic. It wants cost energy. But along comes ATP, and here's how it works. And here's, I got to say, but ATP drives this reaction to be exergonic. Yes, it does. How? Here's what happens. Here's element A, right? And ATP is going to drive that. In other words, it's going to release its phosphate, and that phosphate is going to phosphorylate. Listen to these words we're using. It's going to phosphorylate onto that element A, okay? When it's phosphorylated like that, and then the ADP is left over, that actually, well, hold your thoughts, hold your pants on there for a second, okay? That A now, that element A with its phosphate has like gusto now. It's not going to cause any energy. It's not going to say, hey, I need energy to like hook up with letter B here. It's going to say, I'm ready. okay? And we won't go any further than that. But that element there is ready. It's got its little phosphate ball hanging out there, and it's saying, I'm ready to attack somebody else. So here comes that element A with its phosphate, okay? And it connects with B. When it connects with B, that phosphate is released, and a lot of energy is actually released. How much is released? 7.3 kilocalories is released. When this entire thing happens, it actually releases energy. It's like paying you $7.30. Okay? This whole thing, this phosphorylation, this coupling reaction, they call it couples because there's two parts to it, a couple of it, is driven by the phosphorylation here, okay, or the decomposition of the ATP, the hydrolysis of ATP, right, drives it and produces 7.3 kilocalories. That's released energy. Remember, when you were going to do it up here, it was going to cost you 3.4 kilocalories. So you would have had to pay for this to happen. But now here, you're getting 7.3 dollars out of this, okay? You're only getting 3.4 that you had to pay $3.40 to have this happen. But here, you're getting $7.30 back. Now, this still is requiring energy. This bond here that's between A and B is still requiring that 3.4. So you have to take the net total. It's kind of like you got to spend this, but you're going to make this because this is still the reaction here. A plus B is forming AB. It's just when ATP is involved, you're going to make energy, but you still have to add the energies together. So let's do that. So look at the net result. I'm covering this. So if you do this coupled reaction, you gain 7.3. I know I'm putting a negative. That's because it's released, and you have to say negative when it's exergonic and positive when it's endergonic. Here's your paying, $3.40. When you add these two together, what are you getting? You're getting $3.90 change. Okay, you're making money. You're making energy. That's energy that's released. Woohoo! Energy that's released is good because then you can be using it for something else. And it actually was a payoff instead of costing with the help of ATP. You guys, the first time I learned this, I thought this was amazing. I was like, what? Are you telling me that if we use ATP for all our chemical reactions, we actually gain energy instead of utilizing energy? Yes. So all that food that you're eating that's going into making ATP, that's a good thing, okay? Because ATP is kind of like, think of it like a savings bond, or think of it like an IRA account. Not that you guys know money or anything. I still don't understand money. Think of it like stock that earns money, okay? If you invest in that stock, and it earns more money. And that's what your body does. By eating food and going through cellular respiration and making the ATP molecule, that ATP molecule is like stock. It's going to make more money for you. It's going to drive you to be able to buy a bigger house and a boat and maybe a shore house or wherever else you want to go on a nice vacation, buy some jewelry, who knows what you want to buy. But ATP is the answer. ATP. It does 3 types of work. The most impressive of these, I think, is the chemical with that coupling, because you actually get energy out where you would have cost or have to spend energy to do something. Okay, all the other ones are shape changes. Okay, so that's it for ATP. I think it's an amazing molecule. Let me just show you the other page of that. This is just showing you in a different form the 3 works. Chemical work, I still think my notes are better, but it kind of has the same idea. Take a look at it sometime. Transport work, it's showing how the transport proteins in the membrane are being knocked open and changing the shape. And here's the little motor proteins. When phosphate booms onto it, it shoves it forward. When phosphate releases, then it like pulls back. Boom, pull back, boom, pull back, boom, pull back, boom, pull back. Like a little inchworm going along. Okay? And that's it for ATP. And talk to you soon in another video.